Our mother continent, Africa, is the oldest, the largest, and potentially the wealthiest in the world. This wealth, the rich natural resources of Africa, is being exploited by the United States, France, Great Britain, and other so-called developed countries. The continued sanction and support by the United States and other Western powers of the criminal injustices that exist in southern Africa are typical of the behavior of Western world towards all of Africa. The United States has heavy financial investments in southern Africa as well as in other parts of the continent and is not about to surrender these profits. The fact that humanity, often the lives of black Africans, are at stake apparently means absolutely nothing. Even when African countries become independent, the Western world powers, under the guise of helping to develop Africa, take huge annual profits into their own countries.
Along the east coast of Africa are the countries Black Journal will visit tonight: Kenya and Tanzania. These countries have reacted to and fared differently under this present-day exploitation, or neo-colonialism. In our examination of East Africa, we'll focus principally on Nairobi, capital of Kenya, and Dar es Salaam, capital of Tanzania. These cities are not intended to be representative of the countries as a whole, any more than New York City is representative, of, for example, of our rural South. But some insight into the attitudes and lifestyles of our East African brothers can be gained by focusing on the capital cities. In many respects, our report on East Africa may be considered a subjective one. Tony Batten, producer of this report, found that a black film crew visiting the mother continent for the first time does respond subjectively to the dance, music, art, and life of our brothers in Africa. We who are Africans from abroad realize that in reporting on Africa, we are in fact reporting on ourselves. East Africa, ends and beginnings.
One thinks of Africa and thinks of what? Rhythms, black people in a jungle dancing, masked and perhaps scarred with body marks. These kinds of Western cliches about East Africa are ridiculous in light of what East Africa is about. Some of the old ways still exist in this part of Africa, and if Westerners could understand these ways, all of East Africa, Kenya, Uganda, and Tanzania would not seem mysterious, savage, or very exotic. But these particular Western cliches are not innocent. They were and are designed to put the Western mind at rest and to keep a group of black people in economic bondage. Despite such cliches, such Western myths about East Africa, the African brother is getting it together. It's true there are animals in Kenya, but the Nairobi National Game Preserve, Kenya's largest, surrounds the Nairobi airport, the busiest in all Africa. Ironically, as more jet charter flights arrive, with increasing numbers of tourists, more and more animals depart, never to return to this part of East Africa. This has been one price the Kenya government has had to pay in order to change Kenya into a technologically developed nation. Before the process of development is completed, Kenya will have to give up more of what is beautiful and good about her country. And widespread problems, lack of proper education, disease, and growing unemployment have been far from eliminated. For the past 6 years, the man most responsible for government policy in Kenya is the country's first elected president, Mzee Jomo Kenyatta. Emerging from the Mau Mau Revolution of the 1950s, Kenyatta, mostly through the force of his own personality, has held the country together despite pressing tribal animosities and growing disparity between haves and have-nots. Here, celebrating Kenya's 6th year of independence, Kenyatta states his desire to maintain an economic system of free enterprise and a multiracial society. The retention of many former colonialists as advisors is a major problem in Kenya because of the heavy investment prior to independence of the Europeans, or Muzungus as they are called in Swahili. Total social development of the African is held back. The presence of blacks in power positions has disturbed whites who knew Kenya before independence. The colonialists had as their goal the complete exploitation of East Africa through what they called development. Based upon capitalism, this development set as its measure Western ideals of education and culture, society, and how one ought to go about getting things done. In Kenya, the measure of a man's success is often how closely he can imitate the lifestyles and accomplishments of his former political masters. This crack Kenya regiment strikes one as being more British as it drills than African. Its officers are trained in England and return to Kenya filled with the neat and swaggering caricature of the stereotyped British sergeant major. And throughout Kenya, there are other indications of how thoroughly the English presence has pervaded. Underneath the smile of the white advisor may hide the desperate understanding that his future may depend upon a roll of political dice. The African in Kenya is prone to reassess the value of the European from time to time. But many whites still find it worthwhile to stay on, remaining more and more in the background.
Nchi yetu ya Kenya kweli ni mzuri. Nchi yetu ya Kenya kweli ni mzuri.
These are the people. In Swahili, the Wananchi. The Wananchi have questions of their own about development in Kenya. Enough questions to dump over a dozen members of the government in a recent general election. They are rural people mostly, but they are shifting to the cities in large numbers. While not representative of life in the countryside or in the smaller towns, Nairobi, the capital city of Kenya, has become the only metropolis that Africans, more than 40 tribes of them in Kenya, look to for their future. Morning in Nairobi is filled with the snarl of thousands of workers entering a city in which most cannot afford to live. And yet, it is this growing mass of black humanity on which the future of Africa depends. A combination of struggle and endurance shaped the African's nature, his soul, his happiness. Superimposed over everything in Nairobi is a desire for American and European modernity. There are minibus trips to see lions and music in hotels. In return for this modernity, the government provides investors with the privilege of transferring out of Kenya business profits after taxation through the Foreign Investments Protection Act. The struggle to bring Kenya from an agriculturalist state into a 20th century industrialist nation is thought out and worked at here in these buildings. Nairobi has been described, paradoxically, as a smallish British city, a gem of Africa. But now, it's developing into an enormous downtown glut. New buildings, mostly for government, rim the skyline. Others are not within a price range which would make many Africans feel comfortable. In addition to agriculture, tourism and trade earn great wealth for investors in Kenya. Tourism is largely controlled by whites. Trade is generally in the hands of Asians. Although many Asians, Indians, Pakistanis, and Goans hold Kenyan or British passports, their way of life in East Africa is ending under the pressures of Africanization. The process of Africanization is viewed by the African as getting a job or business formerly held by a non-African. In most cases, this means a slot in an economy controlled by Asians. The only long-standing middle class in East Africa is made up of Asians. Now many blacks feel the Asian must go. Because he can read English and may be well educated in Western ways, life in the village often no longer holds its former meaning for many East Africans. The average black man in Kenya, the Wananchi, continues to trek to the big city. In Nairobi, this black man must hunt, he must wait, he must pray for some work that mostly does not exist. Life outside the cities has changed also. An open market in Kikuyu country operates in the old ways, but city attitudes creep in. It's as if the people want a distance of privacy. The impact of independence is meaningful, but still carries problems. Here, with Kenyatta nearby, the Kikuyu feel secure. They earn a living from subsistence farming on shambas of a few acres. During the colonial period, this land was part of the White Highlands. Now it has been returned to the people. Here a man can make enough to eat, but not much more. Nearby is Gatundu. Gatundu is the birthplace of Jomo Kenyatta. It is here that Kenyatta still lives, preferring the lush, soft landscape of the countryside to the constant hum of Nairobi. It is land such as this that gains Kenya much of its revenue from agriculture. This land can grow coffee, for example, one of Kenya's main export cash crops. It is grown on small cooperatives operated by blacks and large plantations, most still owned by Europeans. Coffee is controlled by the Kenya Planters Cooperative Union, or KPCU, and the International Coffee Board. The KPCU controls growing techniques and milling. The Coffee Board, governed by European and American interests, decides quotas and prices. Kenyatta's brother, J.J. Muigai, is liaison officer between KPCU and the International Coffee Board. We asked Mr. Muigai how the relationship to the International Board is maintained and how KPCU originated.
This started back in 1937, but formerly there was another cooperative somewhere called Ruiru, and this amalgamated with another union, coffee union, and they formed this KPCU back in 1937.
To what extent do the African farmers participate in this cooperative? What is their function?
Their function is, you see, these cooperatives, they are just a cooperation of a number of people who plant coffee in a small area, say from an acre and up to 10 acres. And because it is very expensive to build a factory, they formed cooperatives in order to process their coffee in one place and they sell it in a group.
After initial sorting, the coffee beans are popped from their shells and then stored in fermentation tanks. The beans remain here for 72 hours. They are periodically turned to keep the fermentation process even. After fermentation, the beans are washed to remove the gum that has developed during the process. The beans are dried and washed again, and then they are taken to racks for final sorting. More than 70,000 tons of coffee were produced and exported by Kenya in 1969, much of which was grown on cooperatives like these. On these cooperatives, a lot of the growing process is done by hand. The market for Kenya coffee is very good. and cooperative members like these Dunbarry villagers derive a major portion of their livelihood from coffee. Under this cooperative arrangement, the farmers consolidate their crop and turn it over to the Kenya Planters Cooperative Union. When the coffee is sold at auction in Nairobi, the farmers get their money. But a coffee berry disease and a ceiling imposed on Kenya's export quota, only 2% of the world's total, by the International Coffee Board, help to keep the net profits for the African cooperative farmer in Kenya pitifully low. This coffee milling plant is owned by the Kenya Planters Cooperative Union. The largest of its kind in the world, it is fully mechanized and in some areas operated by computer. The mill employs some 470 workers. With a total workforce of 250,000 in and around Nairobi, this mill provides only a fraction of the jobs required to support the population. We asked Mr. Moigai if profits for blacks would be increased were Kenya to sell its coffee unrestricted by the International Coffee Board.
No, we found we can sell better in the world more than looking market for ourselves. You see, we as Kenya, we don't take that coffee to sell in the other countries. We sell our coffee in the auction here, and the coffee dealers, they take that coffee, you know, into the world, in Germany, Britain, America, Canada, but we are not interested to take that coffee ourselves into the world. You see what I mean?
Are the Europeans who own coffee plantations taxed by the government for their ownership of that land?
There's no land taxation. Well, I'm not in a point of to verify there. I'm a bit doubtful about this land taxation, but let me come to coffee. Both societies or cooperatives and big plantations have to pay export tax to the government. When the coffee is sold here in the auction, every ton exported, at the moment, government takes 200 shillings, both from societies and the plantation.
The plant is a maze of highly technical machinery that grades, roasts, husks, and prepares the coffee for shipment. This mill is seen as an example of industrial progress in Kenya, and in reality, it is. But its very increased automation cuts back on jobs as well. But not all of Kenya's coffee is grown on cooperatives. Many European planters still retain large land holdings where coffee is produced. Coffee grown by Europeans is also milled at KPCU, but for the Europeans, the increased efficiency of the plant becomes a distinct advantage. Since their black plantation workers are lowly paid, the dollar margin of profits for the large landholder is even more greatly increased. Except for a tax declared on incomes earned only in Kenya by these large landholders, little or no revenue is gained by the government from them. We asked J.J. Moigai, a key figure in the relationship between coffee sales and the African farmer, what the revenue earned by Kenya coffee sales is used for.
Well, that's government running. It goes to the government revenue.
I see.
You know, government is the head of state, and it uses all that money, you know, the different...
But it doesn't specifically go back to
the coffee grower?
Right.
No.
I see.
It goes to the government treasury. No, once they get money, it's not kept aside to say that this is the coffee money.
Although conditions in Kenya are changing, life for the Muzungu who wishes to stay on as a Kenyan citizen or advisor is not all that different from the way it was before independence. Occasional mementos like this rickshaw, once pulled by Africans in races for the amusement of whites in front of this very hotel, are trotted out as if to reassure those who might dread another emergency, another Mau Mau. Kenyans, still young in independence, believe that changes for the better are taking place. They feel that these changes are long in coming and that development is slow. The government is bent on industrialization, while today most Kenyan people are still agriculturalists. The road to full national development based on free enterprise and capitalism is long. There is no work for those who may be only partially trained, and Kenyan choices for the future are baffling. But the land is rich, the earth true. And perhaps the real answer to Kenya's problems are hidden in the souls of her people. 600 miles from Nairobi, south and on the coast of Tanzania, there is a ghost town. Once ruled from the Arab Sultanate on Zanzibar, and once the trading capital of the whole east coast of Africa, Bagamoyo now sleeps. Down such trails, slaves walked through these palms to boats lying just offshore. Arab boats took black men as slaves to Zanzibar and on to Arabia. The Arabs took slaves and ivory from East Africa for generations. From Dodoma to Ujiji to Bagamoyo, men sold each other for profit. But Islamic slavery is less precise than Western slavery. A slave could be a teacher, craftsman, writer, a laborer, a man. For the Arab sheiks, with black slaves as companions, the untilled desert beyond Africa became a grandeur to be wondered. These crumbled ruins and Arab cemetery attest to the fact that Islamic culture was firmly entrenched on the east coast of Africa well before the 19th century. The Arabs left Islam, a sense of trade, and a common tongue, Swahili. From these conquered beginnings would come a new thought based on the old ways, African ways. The thought, African socialism based on familyhood, sharing, and self-reliance. Sharing and self-reliance are words common in Tanzania today, and so too is Islam. A Muslim wedding celebration awakens the town of Bagamoyo, and its music transports us to the past and to other unchanging times. The history of Tanganyika's independence and development, beginning with its colonial occupation by Germany in the last half of the 19th century, differs considerably from its northern neighbor, Kenya. The Germans, latecomers to Africa, inherited what trade in ivory and diamonds that was left, allowed the continuance of the Arab slave trade, and made attempts to settle the countryside from 1885 until they lost the territory before World War I. From the 15th century to the 18th, the Portuguese established settlements for commerce and for slave trade. And the Portuguese left nothing except the impractical bondage of all the land they settled. Now revolution in Mozambique to the south of Tanzania is part of their colonialist legacy. The Arabs, however, left much of their culture. Swahili, the language of the Arab trade, has been used in Tanzania as an incredibly unifying force which cuts across the 123 different tribal languages that exist in Tanzania. The wind instrument this musician is playing is a muzuni, an Arab instrument. These are the Arab legacies which have helped Tanzanian development. In 1919, Tanganyika became a British Mandate territory under the League of Nations. But the British already had Kenya. The rush to settle that country was on. In Tanganyika, with less arable land and less development of an extensive infrastructure, railroads, electrical systems, and schools, total development lagged far behind Kenya's. Tanzania was able to keep more of its soul. Dar es Salaam, or Haven of Peace, became the capital of Tanganyika in 1891. Today, with a population of over 250,000 people, Dar is the capital of Tanzania, the United Republic of Tanganyika and Zanzibar. Tanzania achieved full internal independence from Britain in 1961. The harbor at Dar es Salaam is one of the busiest on the East African coast. The city is tropical, but energetic. Business begins at 7:30 in the morning and ends at 4 to get the most out of the productive, cool daylight hours. There's a different feeling in Dar es Salaam than in Nairobi. It's hard to tell what causes this difference, the lifestyle of the Tanzanian, or something more important, his attitude. Unlike Kenya, these new buildings are not all that they seem. Most are extensions of already existing structures built to accommodate an existing need. Along the streets of the market section of Kariakoo, a difference between the lifestyles of Kenya and Tanzania is clear. Tanzanians like to call this part of Dar, Alabama. They say it has some heavy soul. Here, different from the markets upcountry and because of the Muslim influence, men carry on the trade. Although the city streets are busy and there is constant movement, the current Tanzanian government has emphasized rural development. This has been done in order to keep within the framework of the government's policy of socialism and to more completely equalize the lives of the rural people and city people around the basic necessities of life. The march to socialist development by Tanzania can be seen as a total government commitment. Unlike Kenya, the Tanzanian government has banned all beggars from the streets of the capital, preferring to care for them properly in centers and to heighten the self-reliant image of Tanzania. Awaiting a visiting European statesman is a man regarded by Africa and much of the world as Africa's most dynamic leader, Mwalimu, the teacher, Julius K. Nyerere, president of Tanzania. Seated with his two vice presidents, Nyerere chats informally and is relaxed. Somewhat like Macarius, Nyerere's career has been filled with surprises and political turns. When first elected prime minister, Nyerere resigned in 1962. And for most of a year stumped around Tanzania, discovering again just what his people needed most. In December of that year, Tanzania became a republic, and Nyerere the country's first president, polling 98% of the votes cast. From this mandate, Nyerere put forth the socialist policies laid down in what has been called the Arusha Declaration. It is from this position paper that the socialist direction of Tanzania is implemented. Its aims to eradicate disease, poverty, and the lack of education in Tanzania. The occasion, a state visit by a European leader professing a policy of non-alignment, Archbishop Macarius of Cyprus. The State House in Dar is where Nyerere meets the press and conducts state business. But he lives some miles up the coast in a small cottage near the beach. In an interview with President Nyerere at the State House, we asked what the differences were between traditional and Tanzanian socialism.
I don't know. This is a theoretical question. In order to give an answer that is true, that is non-theoretical, one ought to wait until we have built a socialist society here, and then compare the socialist society built on the ideas we have with a society that has been built on more traditional socialist ideas. And then you will see the difference. And we don't know, I don't know what the difference is going to be, but if you want me to answer this theoretically, I will answer this theoretically. Theoretically, orthodox socialism is born out of capitalism. A society develops until it is fully capitalistic. And from this womb of capitalism is born the child called socialism. It's a child born of capitalism. In order to have this kind of society, as I say, you have to develop capitalism fully. Now, we were not developed. Our capitalism here was not developed. We hadn't started. We don't have capitalists here. We have to build a socialist society from poverty. Now, we are saying these ideas are likely to be different because we are starting from the concepts of sharing which come from a basically communal society. There is where we start from. We don't start with capitalism. We understand capitalism theoretically because we've read about it and we've seen some of it here. But this is not the thing under which our people are suffering. They're suffering from primitive poverty.
What is an Ujamaa village, and how important is this to the goals of the Arusha Declaration?
But it is very important. We are saying that a society, or what you call modern development, is a result of people working together. Anything you call development is a result of people working together. People can work together in two ways. They can work together for another. In slavery, they work together for another. In capitalism, they work together for another. Both of these methods do produce something you can call development. But they can also work together for themselves. And we are saying, in our case, we are not going to cut the idea, the thing, development, by working together for another. We are going to work together for ourselves. And we are creating these communities we call Ujamaa villages. Ujamaa is the word we use for socialism. We are going to use these Ujamaa or socialist villages for the purpose of working together for our own good. And this is an idea which is going to come from our own basic ideas of cooperation. This is not going to come from some Marxism from somewhere. This is going to come from basically from our own ideas, basic ideas of cooperation. And we are going to use these ideas to create a modern society, a modern socialist society.
Ali Dadi, manager of an Ujamaa village near Dar es Salaam.
Watu wa Kerege kitu kilichowafanya kuja pamoja ni kutokana na matamshi wa baba wa taifa, yani rais wa Tanzania Bwana Julius K. Nyerere, kutokana na azimio la Arusha.
He says because of the call from our president Julius K. Nyerere, and this falls with the Arusha Declaration.
What does Ujamaa mean?
Maana ya ujamaa hasa ni nini?
Maana ya ujamaa ni kuishi pamoja na mapato yao yote hupata sawa na kugawana sawa, na maisha yao wanayokaa kwenye kijiji huwa wanafanya kazi zao, shughuli zao zote pamoja. Ndio maana ya ujamaa.
He said the meaning of ujamaa as he understands it is people live together, work together and distribute their income communally.
What do the people of Kerege hope to accomplish?
Wanafikiriaje watu wa Kerege watapata baada ya kukaa pamoja?
Watu wa Kerege wanafikiri watakuwa na mapato zaidi. Hata hivyo yameshaonyesha kuna mapato zaidi, ni tofauti namna ilivyoanzishwa na sasa hivi tunakokwenda. Ni juu zaidi ya hali ya mapato kuliko mwanzo tulivyoanzisha.
He says the first thing is their income will be raised up, and this has been proved because the income has been rising up steadily since the time when they came here.
This is Korege, an Ujamaa village. At the present time, there is little mechanization. The government feels that when mechanized farm machinery can be properly handled, then it will be time to introduce tractors and the like. But today, the hoe, or jemba, is the trademark of self-reliance. Under the premises of the Arusha Declaration, all land belongs to the state, which is the people, and must be used to the maximum benefit of all. The declaration emphasizes the necessity of rural development. According to Nyerere, until Tanzania can feed and provide for itself, it cannot be completely free. The Arusha Declaration is the government's attempt to accomplish this and to rid the country of government corruption. Accordingly, one of the declaration's first demands was that no government minister may be involved in business or sit on the boards of corporate firms. No government minister is allowed to own a house in which he does not live. In line with this kind of thinking, President Nyerere slashed his salary by 30% and his ministers by 20%. In this cooperative, the villagers harvest and sell cash products, mostly cashew nuts, communally. In addition, each family has between 1 and 7 acres on which to grow what it wants. All of this can be seen as changing the former attitudes of an entire nation. The government emphasizes that everyone in Tanzania, even government ministers and professionals, must think of themselves as peasants and workers. Because of the difference in attitude between the governments of Kenya and Tanzania, we asked President Nyerere what political ramifications are created when a government considers its workers as important as ministers.
I don't know what the political ramifications are. First of all, let me say this. Apart from ideology, we are saying development to us cannot be the building of a road so that we can point to a road and say, there you are. You know, at one time we had no road, now we have a road. That is development. It can't be the building of a building like this one and say, look, at one time we had no big buildings in Tanzania, now we have big hotels. This is not what we call development. Development to us must be the development of our people. And we are saying it can be brought about by themselves for the purpose of improving their own lives. Now, it does happen that our people are rural people. If development means developing our people by themselves so that they can improve their own lives, well, their lives as peasants. Mm-hmm. And this is where you are going to develop them, because they are going to work as peasants, mm-hmm, to improve their surroundings as peasants, and create, if you like, a new kind of peasant. And this has implications, the political implications of this, that we are going to be creating not merely these social units. These are not simply going to be social units. These are going to be also self-governing units, to the extent to which they will control those affairs which affect their own lives as producers.
Should Tanzania develop a viable middle class, and if it did, what role would that middle class play in the socialist revolution?
I would say a middle class cannot help to develop the ideas of the Arusha Declaration. How could it help? Because we are saying specifically in the Arusha Declaration that we are not going to build classes. We are against the idea of building classes. So a middle class, what is the idea of a middle class? A middle class between what classes? What class are we going to have on top and what class are we going to have at the bottom, where we are going to have this middle class in between? We don't accept this idea. The ideas of the Arusha Declaration are ideas of developing a dedicated leadership to what we call our revolution. And really, if you are going to think in terms where in other places these educated, highly educated or professional people, they belong to a middle class. We really don't want this idea of calling them a middle class. This is a dedicated leadership to the kind of revolution that we want to work here. And really, they're going to be workers. They're going to be workers. They are workers.
Although Tanzania is concentrating on rural development, development of industries for increased productivity and diversification of employment is one of this country's major priorities. This cement factory is an example of how the Tanzanian industrial economy functions. While banks and public utilities have been nationalized as logical results of the goals of the Arusha Declaration, foreign capital is still sought after and utilized. Under the umbrella of the National Development Corporation, a cement factory such as this one may operate with foreign investment capital as well as Tanzanian money. But ownership is equalized between Tanzania and foreign investors, and the government limits the amount of business profits foreign investors may remove from the country. Through the National Development Corporation, profits are earmarked for reinvestment. Tanzania, retaining 50 to 52% of the stock in this corporation, is therefore in a position to decide when production should be maximized and when it should be slowed down. With such careful scrutiny of foreign investments and business operations, we asked if Black Americans would be welcome in Tanzania as advisors.
Well, let me say, one of the biggest bottlenecks for development, for modernization, any of the countries of the third world, is lack of manpower. I've already explained to you this problem of manpower. It's not merely techniques that we want. We want techniques and attitudes. We want a person who is going to help. If he's an economist, we want his techniques as an economist. But he'll be much better for us if he also understands and accepts what we're trying to do. So, and we lack these people, and we recruit them from all over the world. Now, why shouldn't we get Afro-Americans? If we are recruiting these people from all over the world, why shouldn't we get Afro-Americans who have these skills, whether they are economists or technicians of any kind, or whether teachers or accountants, or all of these skills? If you have these skills, why shouldn't you put these skills to us, provided also that you also have some sympathy with what we are trying to do? Because if you don't have sympathy for what we are trying to do, and you say, oh, these fellows say they want to be socialists, you know, and we don't believe in socialism, it's better not to come. If you say, well, I am a capitalist and I want somewhere to invest money, I would say, look, we do allow some capitalism here, but here we have really announced a war against capitalism. So really, if you come, we do allow capitalism, we do allow some private enterprise here, but this is not really the way to identify yourself with the future of Tanzania, because you are identifying yourself with something that we are fighting against. It's no good.
So, the major question in Tanzania today is a question of attitudes. This question troubles over 100,000 Asians in Tanzania. Possessing an economic foothold, the Asians readily provide a base for rapid economic growth. But perhaps here more than in Kenya, the Asian attitude, Asian clannishness, and Asian inability to identify as an African or to integrate into African society makes it virtually impossible for the Asian to fit in. The problem of foreigners is not restricted to the Asians. Tanzania, because of its desire to rid the African continent of white oppression, has become a base from which various Southern African freedom movements can act. At war with Portugal for the past 9 years, we spoke with leaders of the Mozambique Liberation Front, or Frelimo, to determine whether Frelimo merely wanted Mozambican citizens to have the right to vote in their own country, or to separate Mozambique completely from Portugal.
What we are trying to do is to liberate our country. And we saw since the beginning, and we had already experienced from Angola and Guinea-Bissau, that it was not possible at all to find a platform of discussions with the Portuguese colonial fascist regime. It must be clear that we are fighting with arms not to ask the Portuguese to give us the right to vote, no. We are fighting because this historically is the only way for us to attain independence.
This is a Frelimo refugee camp. Here, young men and women, having fled the war raging south of Tanzania, are taken in, educated, and fed. Frelimo claims to have liberated more than a third of Mozambique. Portugal still retains Mozambique, Angola, and Guinea-Bissau. Mozambique is of great strategic importance because it is rich in minerals and more. It could be used as a base for liberation movements against South Africa and Rhodesia. The Portuguese have paid dearly to retain Mozambique, more than $30 million per month for the last 5 years. South African aircraft support is now common peril for Frelimo fighters. With the Portuguese under such pressure, we asked Frelimo Field Commander Armando Panangue what Frelimo would do if the Portuguese evacuated Mozambique tomorrow.
Well, in answering this question, I think I should say, first of all, I should stress how that we think that it's not possible for the Portuguese to leave the country just like that, you know, because they denied us freedom in our country since centuries ago. So, as we've been saying, is that we are conducting any protracted struggle, which it's a people's war. And in doing so, we involve everybody within the country, all the citizens of Mozambique from the south to the north. And since the foundation of Frelimo, we had stressed out the objectives, the goals of the revolution. So this revolution doesn't mean that it's going to end by achieving our independence. The revolution will continue over and over.
What do we need for our revolution? We need skills. We want skills. If you want doctors, a doctor is a skilled man. You want an engineer, is a skilled man. You want an architect, is a skilled man. And we don't have the skills, so we use our universities to produce these skills. But we are saying the skills are not enough. Skills are not enough because you can have a bunch of exploiting doctors, a bunch of exploiting engineers, and a bunch of exploiting architects. And so we want attitudes. If development means developing our people by themselves so that they can improve their own lives, well, their lives as peasants. And this is where you are going to develop them, because they are going to work as peasants, to improve their surroundings as peasants, and create, if you like, a new kind of peasant.
It should be mentioned with respect to our comparisons of Kenya and Tanzania that the political and economic situation in Tanzania is simplified by the fact that there is no dominant tribe in Tanzania. In Kenya, there is some conflict between the two major tribes, the Luos and the Kikuyus.